make field repairs of rail. It found a suitable application in this, and then it went away. It's highly explosive, and it doesn't require oxygen. And once that reaction starts, as long as the reactants are present, good luck getting it out. Could thermite have produced all that molten metal? Well, it's one of our hypotheses. Section 12-4. Unusual residues could arise from thermite, magnesium, or other pyrotechnic materials. NIST acknowledges that it did not look for such evidence. Well, if you don't test for something, you won't find it. That's convenient. Thermite reaction compounds used to ignite a fire produce a characteristic burn pattern. White ash, white, yellow, hot, liquid metal, intense white reaction zone, and leave behind a unique chemical evidence. Common elements such as iron. Now remember, this building was not mostly iron. This building was mostly structural steel. ASTM-A36. Very, very low carbon steel. But we recovered a lot of iron, suggesting that, well, carbon got introduced to that molten metal somehow. How? Here's a meteorite, one of these mysterious frozen, molten and then frozen chunks that Stephen Jones, a physicist from Brigham Young University, analyzed. And he did some electron microspectrography and looked closely at this and see if it matched any of the suspects that we would look for in some of these pyroclastic or thermitic reactions. The molten metal has abundant manganese, and it did in the very beginning when its developer developed it, and one of the purposes for it, one of the side benefits, was the production of these byproduct reactants such as chromium and manganese. So he rules out molten structural steel as a major component. The previous molten metal has small amounts of aluminum, sulfur, and potassium. The previous molten metal has manganese and fluorine in abundance. Manganese and fluorine, commonly used as an oxidizer in thermite. Fluorine is a sol-gel type thermite charges. Hence, when we look at the evidence and it points to, well, it quacks, it wobbles, has web feet, we tend to believe it's a duck. Iron aluminum rich microspheres, do we find that in the dust? That dust is widely available. And yes, to get iron spheres, you almost have to reasonably conclude that it was either vaporized or molten at one point, and surface tension brought it into a sphere. Pulling a magnet across the outside of the plastic bag, dust was taken and dust was analyzed. Using X-ray energy dispersive spectrography, the presence of metallic microspheres implies that these metals were once molten or vaporized so that the surface tension pulled the droplets into a roughly spherical shape. Surface tension or capillary action are usually one of the two behaviors of liquids. They either want to cling to themselves, mercury, or cling to, through capillary action, whatever's containing the liquid. Well, steel has a tendency when it becomes molten, as does mercury, as do most metals, to cling to themselves. High amounts of surface tension. Then the molten droplets solidified in air. Spheres found in the WTC dust. So again, we have evidence of melting, of these chemical reactions of these, or at least, at the very least, extremely high sources of heat. Now, did we get characteristics of using our analysis of iron, aluminum, manganese, the usual suspects in thermite? Yeah, we get those characteristics. Look at our control, look at our test, and pretty good matchup. So there's a signature of walks like a duck, quacks, maybe it's a duck. Corroboration by USGS EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency has begun a reassessment of the presence of World Trade Center dust. Good. Various metals, most notably iron and lead, were melted during the WTC event. WTC Signature Report, Deutsche Bank, December 2003. Producing spherical metallic particles, exposures of phases to high heat results in the formation of spherical particles due to surface tension. Metals have that. They want to stick to themselves instead stick to other things when they're in their molten form. And here we are, a ways away, evidence of high temperature corrosion on the tops of these cars. 1,000 cars near the World Trade Center, 2001. Long ways away, that to me is not the blazing New York City sun, that's something chemical. This corrosion occurred on the car tops, yet the paint was reasonably intact where this stuff didn't settle. What caused all that paint to corrode and rust so rapidly? To me, it's suggesting chemicals. To others, it's suggesting chemicals. Walk like a duck, talk like a duck. Quack like a duck. Web feet. Feathers. Given the mix of trace metals present in anomalously high concentrations of WTC dust such as zinc, copper, and manganese, and the formations of iron aluminum-rich spherules, it is clear that the significant aluminum-otheric reactions occurred, with likely ingredients to include powders of aluminum, iron oxide, copper oxide, zinc nitrates, and potassium permanganate. Again, suggesting thermite, or maybe a more sophisticated version of thermite, which ranges in applications to re-welding the rail across the Old West to rocket fuel. And here we have Los Alamos National Laboratory having a patent on nanoparticle thermite, nanothermite. Direct evidence of explosive destruction, no characteristic of a destruction by fire. So do we have a controlled demolition? Experts said no building like it in a modern steel-framed high-rise has ever collapsed because of a fire. Here's some fires. Here's some steel-framed buildings. August 1970, 50-story building burned for 6 hours over 5 floors, no collapse. May 88, Los Angeles, 62 building burned for 3.5 hours over 5 floors, no collapse. February 91, Philadelphia, 38-story building burned for 18 hours over 8 floors, no collapse. October 2004, Caracas, Venezuela, 56-story building burned for 17 hours over 26 floors, no collapse. And this is World Trade Center 5. Roast some serious marshmallows and weenies in there. Did this building collapse? No collapse. And here's my favorite. This was around the Chinese New Year this year. And boy, let me tell you, they know how to bring in the new year. The Chinese know how to party. It's 44-story Mandarin Oriental high-rise hotel burned on every floor with flames 30 feet in the air, gutted by fire. No collapse. The next day. But fire brought down World Trade Center 7. So, data from FEMA and NIST reports. Official investigations into the WTC collapses. 2001, American Society of Civil Engineers, volunteers, in quotes, heavily dependent on federal government contracts. 2002, FEMA, $600,000 in funding, not much. Turned the American Society of Civil Engineers investigation into an assessment. Gotta love word games. Report released 2002, FEMA report. And they changed their minds on some things, but no big deal. This caused Building 7 to collapse. Now that caused. Now this caused. Now that caused Building 7 to collapse. The latest is office fires. 2002, the building owner sponsored a report. He had billions to collect. 2005, NIST, 3-year, $20 million